That's not so good. So just going to loosen it up ever so slightly, just so it freely swings. And then just going to put just a little dab of super glue on the end, just to stop that from coming loose. There we go. So this is now the tricky bit. Just line it up with the bell. I find it's generally easier to do it like that. Then lining it up through the bell and then getting the individual bolts in place. I find just using the Allen key to help does make it a lot easier. And last one. There we go. Personally, so this is just a seam from the 3D printing, unfortunately, but I personally prefer that at the back. That's just my personal preference. So all I'm doing here is just push the headstock over the top of those 5 bolts, and then what I'm going to do is just put nut on top of the what's equivalent to the crown staple, and just that will just help to hold it tight. And then with each of these, you can just pop the nut over the top of the end of the bolt and use the Allen key on the inside just to actually wind that bolt, wind the nut down onto the bolt, thus against the headstock. So you might find that just a pair of pliers might just help just to hold the nut still as you're winding it down. Sometimes perhaps just a bit of residue on the thread from the manufacturing process can just make it bind ever so slightly at the start. But then as the nut moves down, it's generally then held in place quite nicely against the side of the headstock, so it doesn't become a problem any longer. The difficult bit is perhaps just sometimes getting that nut started. But once it's started, it generally goes in quite nicely. And then just on here, you can see it's just being held in place. Sometimes you might just need a little finger just to help hold it. Just get it nicely. And I always just like to check that the clapper is just moving freely. Just as I'm doing that. And then it's just a case of repeating it for the remaining 2 bolts. Just a bit fiddly sometimes, just getting that nut just initially started on the bolt and it not falling off. And then the last one. Doesn't really take long to do. Just make sure it's nice nipped up. Clap is still freely moving, and then just finish off by just tightening up the crown staple. Sometimes you might find it necessary just to hold the thread of that just while you just grip it, and then just finish it off with a pair of pliers. Again, just make sure that the clap is still swinging free. Nice and free, no problems there. There we go. And there's the bell assembly. The bearings then just push nicely on the end. If you feel it's a bit loose, then you can just put a single layer of sellotape around the edge just to make sure it's extra tight. But that's personal preference. And unfortunately, each individual print is slightly different, so it may or may not need that. But there we go, freely moving. Then that's the bell.